Hello there. Welcome back to the Senate Podcast. This episode, we're going into Attack of the Clones. We're going to do a retrospective. Joining me is the bounty hunter we've all been looking for, Tony Quinones. How you doing?
Well, I'm running from these Imperials there. They're trying to find me. I'm trying to make my way in the universe.
You're
I gotta
just a simple man.
avenge my family's honor. Yeah. I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe. I didn't steal that line from anybody. That's an original. Yeah.
You just came up with that on the spot.
Yeah. Inspiration.
I love it. So this episode, obviously, we're going to be just focusing on Attack of the Clones. But there's been a lot of Star Wars news recently, and I think maybe we could do an episode sometime talking about all the announcements, because they actually announced, 3 or 4 like new movies? Something like that.
Yeah, pretty sure it's 3 movies, one of which might not even actually end up getting made because it sounds too good. And then Star Wars Vision Season 2, and then was that the only show related to the announcement? Yeah, Ahsoka, which I think, you know what, flip me. I think it looks pretty dope.
Okay.
I want to read those books eventually, so,
yeah,
that might be fun. This
is a series we're doing. We're going to go through everything. Our first episode in this series is out of The Phantom Menace. So now we're going to do Attack of the Clones. Anything else you want to say before we dive into it? Because I just want to do this a little differently than we did the first one. And give our overall thoughts of the movie and go through it. But kind of have it more of our own raw opinions of the movie. Because now we're getting into more... more complexity in the saga. The first one was more kind of just set up, but now we're getting into
a pretty
more
fluffy movie.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to say, and then we can kick off.
I will say, I'm trying to be more open-minded as I get older. I used to hate like a good majority of this movie. Like I thought, all the Obi-Wan stuff was great. And I thought everything else was just terrible. You know what? I'll say now, I think the stuff I hated, I still think it could have been done better, and I'll get into that. But you know what? I don't think it's too bad. So I finally like this movie. Like, I just flat out like it. Instead of being split on it. So that was a fun experience to realize, oh, wow, I don't see this in the same way that I used to.
This was a movie for me that, I have a lot of history with. I grew up with these movies. I talked in the first episode about how much nostalgia I had for The Phantom Menace. And I have just as much nostalgia for this movie. And what's funny is I always go back to whenever I was growing up watching these movies in whatever order I decided, either, 1 through 6. Or if sometimes I'd go through 4 through 6 and then 1 through 3. I would just, when I went through my Star Wars marathon, I would watch them differently. And Attack of the Clones was always one of my favorite movies to get to when I was going through my my walkthrough of the movies, or my playthrough of the movies, whatever. And it's because of it feeling like the most serial matinee Star Wars movie out of probably all of them. And I mentioned that a little bit before we started recording, and you know what I mean by that. And, when we start talking about some of the scenes in the movie, I love the action mixed with the cliffhanger and, almost the cheesy drama tropes in this.
It's basically a classic noir movie in space. And that's one of the things I always loved about it.
It was, from the commentary, he describes this movie as being inspired by the great mystery thrillers of the 30s and 40s, which is essentially, half of the movie with, the first 2/3 leading up to the giant action sequence. But it's always been one of my favorite movies in the saga to watch for a lot of these reasons that we'll get into. So the opening crawl, starting with that, Go ahead. I know you took some more notes than I did because I didn't take much notes for this. I have a lot of mental notes that I want to get through. But how about you kind of lead us on the sequences throughout the movie? So we got the opening crawl into the beginning of the movie where we meet a mysterious bounty hunter and we see the destruction of that ship, obviously Padme being attacked, and the introduction of now a 10 years older Anakin and Obi-Wan from the first movie and whatnot. So what's your thoughts? Because this takes place 10 years after. I have some specific thoughts about this sequence that doesn't really involve what's happening on screen. So what do you think about what we actually see on screen and, from watching it through again?
Well, in the Phantom Menace episode, I said that the opening to that movie, it isn't bad. Like I think it escalates the tension fairly well, and stuff like that. But it's kind of boring. Like it's like, oh, we're gonna send these two Jedi Knights to handle a tax dispute. It's like, why? Okay, that's the best you could, like. I feel bad for these Jedi Knights. They're having their time wasted here. But the opening crawl of this movie, it's literally just, okay, there are this group called the Separatists that are people trying to leave the Republic because, they have problems with it and stuff, and they're forming their own group. So, there's a war going on with them, and then Padme is going to join the Senate to vote on whether or not they want to create an army. That's it. Like, it's, as you were saying, like that classic, like, sci-fi serial matinee. Like,
yeah,
there's unrest in the galaxy.
There's unrest in the galaxy.
There's war in the galaxy. And, like, it's just classic, like, A New Hope, It starts with, like, this really simple, concise, way better, in my opinion. And then, so Padme lands on a planet. It's her decoy. And is it the same guy that was in Phantom Menace?
I believe so. Yeah.
I forget his name, but
the Naboo guard captain. Yeah.
And then they leave the ship, and then it explodes, and then it's like, oh my god, what the heck? And then her decoy actually dies in the explosion, and then there's like, it's clear that someone tried to kill Padme, and then she goes to visit Palpatine, and other thing I noted is that the political stuff in this movie is much less boring than it is in Phantom Menace. I understand, like, when these movies released, like, way back, a lot of fans didn't like that they focused so much on politics. And it's like, behind every war, there's obviously the political side. That's what George Lucas wanted to show with these movies. And I do think Phantom Menace, it's a little boring, a little hard to follow. Even now, being, in my late 20s, there were moments in Phantom Menace where I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. But in this movie, Chancellor Palpatine at this point is just like, hey, Padme, someone's trying to attack you, we have to deal with these separatists. And then, Padme thinks it's Count Dooku, and then Mace Windu's like, he used to be a former Jedi. We don't think it's him because he's a genius, obviously. And then Palpatine is like, hey, I insist that Obi-Wan and Anakin be your security guards. And then Padme, at first she's headstrong. She relents to that request, but then she's eventually like, all right, fine. So, like, it picks, like, it moves. We only get the bare basics of what we need instead of this whole, like, melodramatic, drawn-out thing. And then, obviously, which actually leads me to my first criticism of the movie, Palpatine insisted that Anakin be part of it too because he wants him to get with Padme and fall to the dark side because he senses, high midichlorians and force potential in him. But I was wondering, like, but what would have happened? Like, is the Force literally, like, that much of a Deus Ex Machina to where, like, Palpatine knew for sure that this plan would work? Like, what if Anakin wouldn't have went along with Obi-Wan to protect her? What if Anakin wouldn't have been the one to get sent with her later in the movie when they go into hiding? Like, what if certain things would have happened that would have prevented this? What would he have done? Like, would he have been like, oh, damn it, well, my plan's ruined? Like, it kind of feels too convenient in some regards.
Yeah, and my answer to that would be don't look at it as the Force. Look at this now under the lens of the Chosen One prophecy. Like this, it's unrealistic that these events would happen perfectly, and they do happen the way they happen because they're supposed to.
Yeah, true.
And then once we get to the end of the saga, we'll see how it ends. But I'd say that's why it happens.
It's just more of my issues with the whole prophecy thing being an element of the story in these movies. I'd prefer that it wasn't there, but one thing I do want to note though is that in Phantom Menace, Anakin's a kid, so he talks to Obi-Wan for like 5 seconds in the whole movie, basically. And I feel like that movie should have started with him as a teenager. Well, now he's older, so we can actually have them interact. And I do like that moment where they're taking the elevator and they're recounting
and that's where I want to jump in.
Adventure. Yeah. And then, like, it's like a moment, where they're like joking around, laughing, bantering. And I wish there was more of that in these movies. That is definitely a big criticism for me, but I like the moments that we do get it in this and Revenge of the Sith.
So here's what I'll suggest to you, and this is exactly where I want to jump in, and I'm so glad you left off there. Read the novelizations of the movies, especially episode 2 and 3. Especially 2 and 3. The novelization of Attack of the Clones actually starts before the movie, starts, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are off on a mission somewhere else in the galaxy before they get called back to Coruscant. And, when they're in the elevator talking, George put that in there because he wants you to get a sense of this is what the Jedi do. They go off into the galaxy on missions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they kind of reminisce about that. But the novelization actually has them out on a, planet somewhere. I don't know if it's Outer Rim, somewhere else in the galaxy. And you get to read about the internal dilemma that Anakin's going through out in the galaxy. In the Phantom Menace, he was looking out at the stars saying, I'm going to be the first to visit them all. So now he's out there 10 years later as a Padawan. And what he's going through is he is missing the people that grounded him. Yes, he was with Obi-Wan and they end up being like brothers, but he's out in the galaxy thinking about his mother, thinking about Padme, and the book focuses on how when he was out in the galaxy, he was actually thinking about Palpatine. And he just wanted that sense of comfort. So it's a further, it's a deep dive into what gets the attachments Anakin has. And George talks about in the commentary, specifically how Yoda would train these Padawans train the younglings to a certain age until they were old enough to become a Padawan to a Jedi Knight. Anakin skipped that process, as we saw in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So he has more of attachments to certain things and people because he didn't get the typical training a youngling and Padawan would get. So now he has these attachments to his mother, to Padme, to Palpatine, that those attachments lead to how George put it. Attachments lead to greed because you want to keep what you have. You don't want to lose what you have. Then that greed leads to anger when you lose what you want. And then that anger leads to revenge for taking, obviously, we'll get to that in the story. But this is what the Jedi were kind of teaching their Padawans to let go of, was the fear of losing their attachments.
Yeah.
So when he's out in the galaxy, he's thinking about Padme, Palpatine. So when we get to the opening of the movie, he meets Padme after 10 years. And that's an awkward scene. But think about this kid who for 10 years has been off on missions. You know what I mean?
I
and
actually really
sees the angel from the Phantom Menace.
Yeah. I really like, I think, Hayden's performance has been heavily criticized for over 10 years, you know. I think he's legitimately pretty good in Revenge of the Sith. In this movie, he's hit or miss for me, but the moment where he meets Padme, I think he does a great job because, like,
Yeah.
he just reacts like I would react. Like, you know, like seeing this beautiful woman that I met when I was a kid years later and, like, not knowing, like, I love, like, a lot of people say it's cringy, but I love when she says, like, you've grown up. And then he's like, oh, so have you. Grown more beautiful, I mean. Like, it's a cringy line, and, like, she just basically takes it like, aw, you're so adorable. But, like,
yeah.
I, like, when I talk to beautiful woman, I say shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really relatable thing, you know, that, like, makes you relate to him if you're that kind of person. So I think that's one of the moments where Hayden really shines in the role. And
Yeah.
I feel like I've said that I feel like he kind of feels different than Jake Lloyd's Anakin in certain ways. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see him as, like, exactly that kid grown up all the time, but in this moment, I feel like that they're kind of one and the same.
I agree. Here we're also introduced for the first time in this movie to Jar Jar, who is kind of at the right hand of Padme. That wasn't the case in the first movie. So you get to see this evolution of Jar Jar's character, which is an underrated aspect of this movie.
I got something to say about that later.
Okay. I do too, because this is the setup for
not in a positive way either. But,
I have a positive thing to say about it. So anyways, this is where we're introduced to I forget his title, but Jar Jar as the second in command, not second in command, but, you know, he's part of the team for Padme. And I wonder if that's why Palpatine, or I guess overall the Separatists, hired the bounty hunter to assassinate Padme. Because Padme was in this movie, right, like you said, to sign a bill to create an army. I don't know if the answer was ever given if she would have signed that bill or not. So I'm wondering why the Separatists were trying to assassinate her. And what happens is, you know, I'll just kind of go forward a little bit, is she tries to get assassinated, ends up leaving for her own safety, and then who steps up? Actually, Jar Jar does.
Oh, Jar Jar, yeah.
For the Senate, for the voting of the army. So I wonder if that was the reason for her, you know, being assassinated, or if it was also to get Anakin and her together, like you mentioned. I could see both aspects of it.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's just a testament to Palpatine and how intelligent he is.
I kind of wonder if, like, Palpatine put Jar Jar in that kind of a position because he knew that he was an idiot,
and he would say yes.
He would make the wrong decision.
Exactly,
which is really cruel when you think about it. Like, because, like, you know, Jar Jar sees that as like, oh, I finally accomplished something. You know, I redeemed myself from, you know, being a laughing stock. And now I'm in this spot, but he doesn't know the full weight of it. Like, it's actually kind of I never thought I'd say
sinister.
That I kind of feel bad for Jar Jar, but I kind of feel bad for Jar Jar.
Well, there's a scene where it's right after Obi-Wan sends the distress signal to Tatooine, and then he tells them to relay it, and then Anakin and Padme relay the message to the Senate. And in the Senate is Palpatine, his people, and the Jedi. And what happens is, you know, Yoda and Mace, they're like, wow, things there are worse than it seems. We got to go. They start leaving, and Jar Jar's standing there next to Palpatine. And Palpatine looks at, what's the blue guy's name? I can't remember it right now.
I'm
blanking. But anyways, he turns and he's like, wow, if only Padme was here to approve the emergency bill.
Yeah, and then like it
pans
up
to
on
Jar
Jar, and then Jar Jar's like, oh, I wonder if I should do something. which I mean was
I've never caught that until watching it back recently.
Yeah, that was a respectful thing for him to do, but it was like right place, wrong time in a way.
It was a perfect planning on Palpatine's part. But
oh yeah,
that's just what I wanted to say about Jar Jar real quick. So going back to the bounty hunter, Padme is asleep, right? And Obi-Wan and Anakin are standing outside, protecting her. And Anakin senses something's wrong, busts in the room, kills the things that were trying to kill Padme. You know what I mean? And then jumps out the window, grabs onto the droid, and essentially the chase scene begins. And George in the commentary says that he loves scenes like this. He loves racing, and he always includes some kind of chase scene or racing scene. So here we get a lot of action in Coruscant. And I don't know if you noticed the difference that I was talking about last time with how Coruscant was depicted in The Phantom Menace versus 2 and 3. But here we get our first actual close-up of the streets of Coruscant in this action sequence. So what do you think about the bounty hunter? Because the bounty hunter is actually a female, and George did that intentionally just to bring some diversity because we're not used to that. And it's funny because he's like, wow, usually the bounty hunter's like some grizzled monster, but he's like, it's actually some woman, but she ends up being a monster underneath. She's a changeling. So I thought that was pretty cool. We get that scene when Obi-Wan walks into the bar and the guy offers him some death sticks.
Yeah. You don't want to sell me death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life.
And he made that obviously reminiscent of A New Hope, the cantina, but with Obi-Wan walking in and cutting off the guy's arm.
That was perfect.
Yes.
Ewan McGregor, throughout the entire prequels, did a great job of channeling Sir Alec Guinness, but in this scene, he is Alec Guinness is Obi-Wan. Like, perfect, like, right to a T. Like, it's incredible.
It's amazing. So we get that scene, and just the chase scene. There's not much, I guess, story going on here. It's just a great scene. So what else do you think about the whole Coruscant sequence here?
Okay, well, first, I feel like you're saying, like, it seems like it's portrayed differently. I feel like it's just, we're just shown another part of it that's, like, more rundown.
Like the slums,
kind of, and, like, it's at night. I love it. Like, this is, like, one of the first instances that I can remember in my life seeing something that was essentially cyberpunk.
Yeah.
It's that, like the bright lights, the flying cars, the bar that's, like, not like the cantina because it's, like, populated. There are, like, people watching sports on TV. They're, like, the strippers and stuff like that. I love the aesthetics of that. So before I talk about what I think of Django's whole plan here, because I got some stuff to say about this whole plan. I want to point out two small moments. So when Padme is talking to Obi-Wan and Anakin about, like, talking about, like, protecting her and stuff and, like, what they think's going on, I forget, like, Obi-Wan saying something and then Anakin jumps in, and then Obi-Wan is just, like, a total dick in this scene. Like, he's like, you will learn your place, young one. Like,
that same
Anakin,
thing happens,
like,
at the end of the movie as well.
It seems like this is the first instance of Anakin being, like, disrespectful to Obi-Wan, and instead of Obi-Wan, like a proper master would do, say, I'll talk to you about this later. He just, like, berates him like an angry dad in front of people and embarrasses the poor dude. So, like, I feel like, I wonder if that was intentional by George to show that Obi-Wan wasn't, like, really fit for being a master and just kind of had to fly by the seat of his pants kind of thing.
I think this was to set up. Yeah.
He didn't react in a way that, like, I don't feel like Qui-Gon would have reacted that way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I think that shows, how Qui-Gon would have handled it differently.
Yeah.
because Obi-Wan's just Obi-Wan felt that I think Obi-Wan felt that he wasn't ready for this, but he did it because it was Qui-Gon's basically dying wish.
Yeah.
Was for him to do it, but he wasn't ready. So then this plays into when they're on Tatooine after his mother dies, and he says he wasn't powerful enough because Obi-Wan and the Jedi are holding him back, and you could see him start blaming people.
Yeah.
You know, and this, you know, obviously what you're saying right there kind of leads into that.
Okay, and then I forget, like, when Padme walks away, I think, isn't Obi-Wan like saying to him to like relax and stuff, like or like something like that, and then he's like, but she was pleased to see us, you know. I'm like, I love that moment because it's like, Obi-Wan knows how Anakin feels, and I feel like he was like, she was pleased to see us, you know, like, I feel like that would, like,
they play off each other.
So
very
like,
well.
I feel like Obi-Wan's pretty layered in this movie because, like, he has moments where he is genuinely an asshole, but then he also has moments where, you know, he's like a playful dad, you know, like, it's cool.
Yeah. I think he shines when they play off each other. And then I think he also, I mean, what a bona fide actor, honestly. And he plays Obi-Wan perfectly, and you get to see him really stretch his, you know, his legs when he gets off on his own shortly because he finds the dart, that poison dart, and he takes it real quick. He takes it to
Dexter Jetster, the greatest character in the whole saga.
He takes it to the absolute greatest character in Star Wars at this diner, which is a nod to what do you say it was a nod to? What's his other movie before this?
American Graffiti.
He says it was a nod to that with the diner and just the whole aesthetic of it, which is cool. I think it fit. That was, like we just said, that we got to see the slum side of Coruscant. Now we're seeing maybe like the how do you want to put that aspect of Coruscant where it's more light. You don't see the dark. You know, you get the imagery of this might be like not a downtown, but like more of a like suburban section of this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, here's a diner. You know what I mean? Where you would go to have breakfast. It's just cool to see it. And he takes the dart there for some reason and ends up getting answers where it's a Kaminoan dart that might not be in the archives at the temple, the Jedi temple. And then this is where, like I said, Obi-Wan really gets to be on his own and kind of carry things on his own shoulders for a while until we're introduced to Jango, which we'll get to. But
okay, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say this is where they separate. This is where Obi-Wan goes, and now he has to figure out what's going on with this assassination attempt, and Anakin is tasked with bodyguarding Padme. So he takes her to her home planet of Naboo, which we see again. And I could keep going. So this is where they split up. So we'll leave it there. What were you gonna say?
No, I wanted to kind of jump back and talk about Jango's plan.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Jango's plan, Jango, buddy, I love you. Your plan sucks. This plan. So Palpatine. I think I got this right, but I'm still not even sure what even happens here. Palpatine asks him to assassinate Padme. So he asks another bounty hunter to assassinate Padme. And then that bounty hunter sends a droid to assassinate Padme. And then that droid sends little worms to assassinate Padme. Why didn't Jango just fly over to Padme's window, pull out his rifle? We know he's a good shot. And just like try to shoot her. And then maybe
if you want it done right, do it yourself.
Like, this is the most convoluted plan for no reason because all that rigmarole adds nothing. Like, it's
George talked about this. Oh, what did he say?
It's so stupid. Like, it's like one of the things about this movie that I still can't see in a different way. Like, I'm just like, no, but it, like, I don't understand any of this.
See, this is one of the downfalls of Star Wars in general is that George really went unchecked and did whatever he wanted to do. I know at the beginning of the commentary, he talks about how he added so much to all of these sections that we're talking about now because he just wanted to. He just wanted to add more action, more drama. He just more and more at the expense of the story. But I know what you mean. It would have been cool to see. You know what? We did see Django, right? Wasn't Django on Coruscant? And didn't he like fly away at the end? He did. He killed the changeling because the changeling was being interrogated
he shoots
by
her with
the
the
Jedi.
dart, and then they look over, and then he flies away.
Why didn't he do that to Padme?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, it's so... And then, like,
okay,
Obi-Wan and Anakin somehow slice the worms off of Padme's face, and they don't make contact with her at all.
I love that.
And somehow, like,
that's absurd.
That doesn't even wake her up. Like, she doesn't wake up in the middle of that. She only wakes up when they're all done. Like,
plot twist, Anakin roofied her.
Jet lag.
She was just out.
Like, that's the most severe case of jet lag I've ever seen. Damn.
Well, I do love that scene, just to go back to that real quick, because that shows how Anakin really dialed into his Force abilities and sensing exactly how to kill those things without hurting Padme because of how much he cared for her. So I do love that scene, but I know it's absurd.
It's pretty interesting that when Anakin and Obi-Wan are talking while she's sleeping, it's just like one line. Obi-Wan mentions that he doesn't trust politicians. Like, he's telling Anakin to not really trust Padme because politicians can't be trusted. And I'm like, I wonder if there's like any expanded universe stuff that fleshes that out more, because I never noticed it, and I don't feel like it. I don't remember it ever being brought up in anything that I've seen. Like Obi-Wan not liking politicians. Like, I wonder what the deal is with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just going off of the movies, maybe it's the Jedi are supposed to be. They're not employees for the Senate, or you know what I mean. The Jedi are their own group. They're not supposed to be the peacekeepers for the Republic. You know what I mean? But they end up becoming that, which I think is, they get into why that is not supposed to happen, but the Jedi go down that route. So I don't know. I think Obi-Wan is that's showing how Obi-Wan is similar to Qui-Gon in that way, to where he doesn't want to be involved with the politics or anything like that. He wants to be a Jedi, not a true true Jedi, but he just wants to be more of a Jedi than an employee for the Senate. I would assume. So yeah, they end up splitting at this point, and I think it's cool to see Anakin leave with Padme. You get to see him go in undercover a little bit. They get on that ship, and
he actually isn't. I saw a YouTube video by Chris Stuckman. I don't know if you know who that is.
I don't think so.
He posed a valid question: if Anakin and Padme are supposed to be like in hiding, but why does Anakin still like outwardly wear his Padawan braid? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
anybody who knows anything about anything would be like, oh, he's a Padawan. Like, and like they're always outside when it's like she could get sniped at any given moment. Yeah. And then one of my problems with this is that when Padme's packing and Anakin's talking to her, at first, they're just making like regular conversation, and then he just starts bitching. Like, he's just like, oh, Obi-Wan's holding me back, and this and that. And then, I mean, there's that moment where Padme is like, well, sometimes our mentors can see our flaws better than we can. That's how we grow. And then Anakin's like, I know. So he does have a moment where like he's self-aware, like, I know, he kind of chills out a little bit, but it's like, I mean, I understand.
It's that child in his character.
Yeah. But I feel like maybe it was a little too strong, too fast.
I think that's where it comes into the amateurness of Hayden Christensen at the time, because he was almost unknown up to this point,
Yeah.
So here we get to the second act of the movie. We talked about the first one with the introductions and the chase scene, the bounty hunter, setting up what would be the rest of the movie. So with this second act, we split into two storylines. plot threads. Obi-Wan going down his like detective path to find the bounty hunter, and then Anakin and Padme's relationship developing / going to Tatooine. What route do you want to go down first?
Actually, you know what? I've had kind of a new thought process about the Padme Anakin stuff. So I think it'd be fun to talk about that last.
Okay.
So, well, let's talk about what I think we can both agree is the best part of the movie. Obi-Wan being a private detective. It's great.
Obi-Wan and Jango. I love Jango.
Oh yeah, Jango's
just real quick,
cool.
I'll talk about him. Yeah. Growing up, me and my one friend loved Star Wars. He was a huge Boba Fett fan. I was always a huge Jango fan. I just love Jango. I think he looks cool with the silver and the blue, the dual pistols, the flamethrower on the wrist.
I love that little touch too. Like he gave his DNA to the Kaminoans to create the clone army for money, but he asked for an unaltered clone so he can have it as a son.
You know,
so
it wasn't
that
supposed
makes
to be
you
like
wonder,
that.
that makes you wonder, like right there, you can assume a lot about Django. Like maybe he's always kind of wanted kids, but he can't have kids, or maybe he's never been able to find a woman, or maybe he had a woman and she died. So then he's like, the only way that I can have a son and have that thing that I want is for it to just be myself. And that's interesting. And it's not like, like shoved in your face that much. It's just like one line, like, oh yeah, the only thing he asked in return is for a clone for himself. And then like we know that he loves Boba, like he's looking out for him and stuff. Boba helps him out, like he warns him, when Obi-Wan's coming, he's in the ship cannon, like firing at Obi-Wan, protecting his dad. Like there's such great storytelling just with that, and it's subtle. And that's I don't feel like the prequels are subtle enough, but when they do have subtle storytelling, I think it's some of the best stuff in the saga, in my opinion.
I agree. Okay, so we skipped a little bit, and that's fine, because I want to go into a little bit of what you just said and kind of tie it all together. So here we go. Boba Fett. George wanted originally Boba Fett to be an exact clone that just veered off the path of the other clones, like we see with something like the Bad Batch or Rex or something, if you watch Clone Wars Season 7, and, something like that. It wasn't until, because George had this story, he had the plot done back in the 70s. Now it's his job to create the story in each chapter. He said he sees it as 12 hours of a story, 6 chapters, 2 hours each. That's how he described it in the commentary. He said that, Boba wanted Boba to be a clone of Jango that just split off. But it wasn't until right before, when they were creating the story of this, that he thought that making Boba an unaltered clone of him and being his son gave Jango more character. And I love that decision. So that I think is really interesting. I think that's one of the best aspects of this, because I actually put on Twitter today that the prequels are not something that was made after the fact. The prequels were made in the beginning with everything else. So this is one true story that George just created along the way with more advancements and whatnot.
So he had the rough ideas for the prequels way back when?
Yeah. Originally it all started with the Clone Wars, and that's the next thing I want to get into. This movie is where George really could take off with the clones, which he had the idea for from the very beginning, and it's referenced in A New Hope, is the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is, as he puts it, the start of the Empire. And we see later with these clones, they have the same ships as the Empire. Obviously, they look the same. And this is where he could develop how a democracy turns into a dictatorship. So he says that he has a larger story to where this, like I said, a democracy turns into a dictatorship, and how you can see democracy fall. And then he has the more personal story developing with how you can see a good person become bad. So this is where the story really, really picks up. And he uses Jango and Boba to do that. So to what you said about Jango and, you know, if there's more material on him out there, there actually is. I'm not sure what the book's called. Probably something Bounty Hunters. There's comics, there's books, and it goes into Jango's past, into why they picked him as the template for the clone army. And I think that's just cool for a character in general, just as a trope. Like, you're creating a clone army and you want to pick the quintessential person to clone. That's like picking David Goggins to clone for an army. You know what I mean?
Okay, I have a question. Maybe we'll get into it later. Who was Sifo Dyas? Because I still don't understand what's going on with that. Exactly.
It's been a minute since I went through all that. So that George says that question gets answered in the next movie. You're talking about regarding the creation of the clone army.
Yeah, because the Kaminoans say that like Sifo Dyas asked them to create the army, but then when Obi-Wan talks to Jango, he's like, "I don't know any Sifo Dyas. I was recruited by a man called Tyrannus, which is Count Dooku, as we later find." So I'm wondering, because I think I've heard that like Sifo Dyas was a name that Count Dooku was using, but then I guess in between then and then he became Palpatine's apprentice and then changed his name and then started using a different name. It's a little weird.
Sifo Dyas is how do I put this? I'm trying to remember because I believe they go into it in a book called Dooku Jedi Lost. That Dooku, when he was growing up, within the Jedi Order, he was close friends with somebody named Sifo Dyas.
So Sifo Dyas was a actual person.
Sifo Dyas is an actual person.
Oh, okay.
Unless I'm getting that mixed up with something. Like I said, it's been a little bit since I've looked into this. But for the point of this story,
I think Yoda and Mace Windu actually bring that up later on.
Somebody does, yeah. I think Obi-Wan is shocked when he hears that because he mentions to Sifo Dyas died 10 years ago.
He mentions to them that the clones were created by Sifo Dyas, and then Mace Windu, I think, is like, Sifo Dyas is dead.
Yeah.
Basically, okay.
So basically, you can just get from this, though, that there was a section of the Jedi that kind of veered off. And that's kind of what I was talking about in the Phantom Menace retrospective with Qui-Gon, how he didn't veer off as much, but he was alongside the Jedi. So you have this small contingent that did veer off, and they get into that in books like Dooku Jedi Lost. And I might get into it in Master and Apprentice as well, but and maybe Plagueis. But Dooku basically left, got in league with Palpatine, right, and the Separatists. Palpatine ordered this clone army to start being created 10 years ago. I'm assuming he started the clone army as soon as he became the Chancellor at the end of the Phantom Menace, because this takes place 10 years after. So I'm assuming as soon as he became Chancellor, he ordered this army to be created through other means. He doesn't do it himself. He always gets people to do his bidding for him. That's how he does it. So George describes it as Mussolini, as Hitler, as Caesar. It's when democracies or republics, they're in a time of crisis and they give emergency power to somebody to become in charge, a dictator or whatever, because it's a time of crisis. They need someone to lead them. And then you see how the ultimate power corrupts and they are unwilling to give up that power. And George, a quote from him from the commentary is, "This isn't the first time we see a dictator starting a war so that he doesn't have to give up his power." And he's obviously referring to real life events, but That's essentially what's happening. Throughout the last 10 years, there's been nothing but conflicts because 10 years goes by and he's still the chancellor because there's been skirmishes throughout the Republic. And if you think about it, that's what also kept Padme in power. Because essentially, if she's queen, by this time she would have retired 10 years later, and she could have moved on with her life. She could have had a family. She could have had kids. But she has stayed queen for this long because of the conflict in the galaxy, which then also plays into her meeting Anakin at this point. So,
well, she isn't a queen in Attack of the Clones. I think she's a senator now, right?
Yeah, so she gives up being queen, becomes senator,
Yeah.
but yeah, she would have been retired at this point, but since all this is going on, she wants to be there for her people because of the constant conflicts that's going on. So then she ends up leaving with Anakin. So Obi-Wan wants to track down Jango, getting back to this thread. He goes to the...
Sorry for veering us off on a big tangent.
That's what this is about. We get into our thoughts and opinions, and I'll give you as much information and backstory that I can think of right now.
Okay.
It's good. So he goes to the Jedi Temple. He goes to see, what's her name? What's her name? What's her name? Help me.
I'm gonna just look up Attack
Who
of
can
the
get it
Clones,
faster, you or me?
Old lady in library. Freaking
I can't. I'm thinking of so much right now.
Old lady in library. Jocasta Nu.
Jocasta Nu, yeah.
I never even knew that she had a name, actually.
Yeah. Jocasta Nu.
I like this scene because, like,
it's great. Yeah.
It kind of feels like a political thriller a little bit, where like somebody's like trying to find some classified information, and then like they ask like an official about it, and then they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, and then Obi-Wan's like, no, I know this planet's real, and then she's like, the archive here has every piece of information you could ever want, so if it's not in our records, then it don't exist, homie. And then it's like, dun dun dun, like, what's going on? Why doesn't it exist? Why are they trying to hide a whole planet? What? Like, it's a great scene of like making you curious, because it's like a mystery noir thriller, so it's like,
so good.
Like strings the audience along with questions.
So then he doesn't get the answers from Jocasta Nu, and what does he do? He goes to Yoda. And here is where we actually see what George was saying and showing in the other movies, where Yoda trains the younglings. So we get to see the younglings for the first time in training with Yoda. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Are these
for multiple reasons? Are
those like pod racing helmets that they're wearing?
It looks like it. I don't know. It looks like just the helmet that Luke had on in New Hope. It's probably a callback to that. Because I think they are deflecting things, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
A callback to that. So it's funny because Obi-Wan, that's how Obi-Wan trains Luke in A New Hope. And he got that from Yoda.
I have an opinion about that, so just bookmark that little bit and then try to remember it when we talk about A New Hope. Because it's a small thing, but it's one of my things about how George retcon things that didn't really need retconning. But yeah, whatever. It's a small thing.
So he goes to Yoda, and I love Yoda in this movie. I'll say so much more about him at the end, but
I love Yoda being all cheeky. He's like, Obi-Wan lost a whole planet.
I was just about to say that.
And then the children start laughing. It's like, oh, Yoda got jokes, huh?
Yeah,
which we see in Return of the Jedi too, when he jokes. He says to Luke, like, when you're 100 whatever look this good, you won't, or something like that. like I love that Yoda, he's mostly like, like really stoic and wise, but he has other aspects to his personality that show sometimes. I think that's really cool. Like
George
it prevents him from being a static character.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he accomplishes in this movie, because George says that he doesn't want him to just continue to talk in fortune cookie terms, like short sentences. You know what I mean? Of just wise, phrases and parables, whatever. He gave him personality, which he has always had, and he did reference Return of the Jedi, like
Yeah.
you just did. And he pulls it off perfect in this scene with the younglings because he just starts joking on Obi-Wan in front of the kids, and the kids start laughing at Obi-Wan.
The other thing I love about this scene too is that like in other kind of movie that's in this genre, it would have been Obi-Wan goes to Yoda, and he's by himself, and then Yoda exposits what he needs to know, and then Obi-Wan's like, "Oh, thanks, Master Yoda," and then he leaves. But because Obi-Wan shows up at Yoda's class, Yoda uses the younglings to help Obi-Wan figure it out. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he like brings up
shows how wise he is.
Hologram, and then he's like, "Oh, yeah," and then Obi-Wan's like, "Yeah, the planet should be here," and then Yoda's like, "Oh, the planet should be there, but it's not." So kids, what could that mean? And then the one kid's like, somebody erased it from the archive. Like, it's a fun way to like still like Yoda had his class interrupted, but he still uses them to like learn something and like use their brains. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fun little twist on a kind of scene that is like really standard and stereotypical.
Yeah, and if you like, if you're the type of person, or whoever is the type of person that just doesn't like the Star Wars or the movie, if you watch these movies, moments like this make the movie worth watching. Because how could you just not enjoy it? Enjoy it. It's just fun.
Yeah,
like George says, the movies for kids. It's fun. Even though there's a lot of, especially in the prequels, there's a lot of serious topics, political, emotional, a lot of violence. So at this point, Obi-Wan goes to that sector where the planet should be. He gets into his Jedi Starfighter, which we see. I don't know if it's the first time, but I actually really like his Starfighter. It's red and like gray. I like that ship a lot. I don't think it's
that's the one he uses in Revenge of the Sith too, right?
Yes. I love
how his droid looks too. I just think it's cool.
R5. I think it's R5. Yeah,
I think it's cool.
Yeah, I like it. I'm partial to the X-wing. I love the X-wing. If I could be in any ship, it'd be an X-wing. Jedi Starfighters.
The cool, sound it makes and everything. It's iconic.
I love it. Iconic. So he heads to Kamino, and I believe George said that he has always wanted to do a fully water planet.
And I love Kamino.
It's so good. And he talks about now, obviously, with the VFX technology, he could do something like this. And he talks about the jump from episode 6 to episode 1 was like going from, he quote him, 0 to 80 with the learning curve. But then going from 1 to 2 was like going from 80 to 90 with the learning curve. So he was able to do a lot more in this that he said he always imagined in his wildest dreams, but now he could actually do because of ILM's magic, So we see Kamino, all water planet, awesome, with the cool alien-like creatures. This is another aspect of the movie where you just have to love Attack of the Clones for some of the crazy things that it does with the places you go. I was thinking about in each Star Wars movie, all the different planets you go. In Attack of the Clones, they go a lot of different places. We see a lot of Coruscant. We see that cool lake on Naboo, which I want to get into. We see Kamino. We see Geonosis. We see Tatooine again. It's awesome. I think the movie is incredible. We have an amazing space fight that we're going to talk about because we can get into it. But he shows up to Kamino, and the Kaminoans are like, it's been 10 years. We were expecting Master Sifo Dyas. It's been 10 years. This is where it really becomes a noir.
Yeah, dude, like Obi-Wan kind of channeling Qui-Gon, because in Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon, he was really clever and sly, and he knew how to weasel his way in any situation. He was great at improvisation and stuff. And then I love that there's that moment where when they say that, Obi-Wan's like he doesn't know what's happening, but then he's just quickly oh yeah, well, my master sent me to ask about the army. Like,
Yeah.
he has to think on his feet and stuff, and it's a great, like, as much as the prequels are about Anakin, like growing and becoming a Jedi master and stuff, I think they're also a great coming of age story for Obi-Wan, and showing
Yeah.
that he still has some growing that he has to do, when it comes to being a Jedi and stuff. And this is basically that moment for him.
I love it. I think him on, Camino, such a great sequence in the movie. So he's going through looking at the clones, wow, these clones are impressive. Where is the person, that there was a template for these clones? She says, well, he's living here and he wants to go meet him. So he walks in, and I love this exchange when he walks in the room, because I'm going to say what I think, and it's exactly how George puts it. As soon as he walks into the room, he knows that this is the bounty hunter. And as Django knows, as soon as this Jedi walks in, he knows that this is the Jedi that's looking for him. So that's why he, what does he say? He says in another language to his son something, and it's like, okay, they found us.
Yeah, dude.
Get the things, we're leaving.
Even Boba, even before Obi-Wan walks in the door, when Obi-Wan knocks on the door and Boba opens it, and he asks who he is and stuff, and then he's like, oh, I'm a Jedi, I'm going to talk to your dad or whatever. Boba has this look on his face immediately, like, he's sus. I got to go tell my dad about this. This is weird. I don't like what's going on here. So, like, it shows that, from childhood, Boba Fett was always, like, having to be street smart, having to think on his feet.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really subtle moment. Again, that subtle storytelling that I love about the prequels.
I think this is so underrated, this whole sequence, and especially what comes next, because basically he leaves and they get into a fight, and fast forward a little bit, they are Obi-Wan has to stop the bounty hunter, right? So him and Django start fighting. This is where George gets to show off the Boba type character, which is obviously Django in this, in a better way than he could have back in the day in Return of the Jedi. I love this
fight, dude.
The fight is so good, and what's funny is he held back because he didn't want to show off everything just yet. So I don't think he uses the rockets or the flamethrower or whatever. He uses the jetpack, the grappling hook, the guns, and he's fighting against a Jedi. So we get to see, it's not Luke versus Boba, which is not a good fight, but we get to see Obi-Wan versus Django. Fight's amazing.
Dude, we need more hand-to-hand fights in Star Wars. Where are the hand-to-hand fights in Star Wars, huh?
George specifically mentions that he wanted to make it hand-to-hand because it's something you would never expect. Like, seeing a Jedi
how many Star Wars movies have we had
hand-to-hand
in total? This is the only one, as far as I remember, except for Solo, which it makes sense for that movie, that has a hand-to-hand fight. Come on. I'm starving over here.
It was so good. Just the way they pulled off. And obviously you had Slave One in the background, iconic ship. And when you see Slave One, you know that something's about to pop off. So it's funny. You get to see Boba as a kid piloting Slave One. Iconic ship. Anything else you want to say about this fight real quick? Because we got to get into the space portion.
Obi-Wan's jump kick is
iconic.
Like, it's just so, like, Django like flies in the air, and then Obi-Wan's like, I don't think so. Like, it's just such a great, like, visual. I can't say it's a visual gag, but it is kind of shot like one in a way, but it's not in a bad way. But, like, it's just something, like, I'm sure, like, people watching this movie for the first time when it released were like, did Obi-Wan just do a flying kick? Like, it's, it's just like one of those things, like, I could tell that when George was writing this scene, he was just having an absolute blast. Like, it'd be funny if Obi-Wan did a flying kick. I'm going to write that.
And I love it. And that's one of the reasons that I say it's one of the most serial matinee movies out of all of them, because what's essential in that type of movie or style is the constant cliffhangers that happen, and that happens throughout all of the action sequences in this movie where Boba has the upper hand. Cliffhanger, what's going to happen? And then something happens, and Obi-Wan now has the high ground. He has the advantage. Cliffhanger, what's going to happen? And then Boba comes back, or Jango comes back, whatever. You know what I mean? So it's all that constant back and forth of who has the upper hand, and it's played out to the extreme until they get into the ship. And what's funny is what happens when he gets into the ship. Jango hits his head. You know what I mean? You know that part?
I don't know if I remember.
It's so dumb, but Jango hits his head, and it is actually a callback to, what is it, A New Hope, where the stormtrooper hits his head. And George specifically put that in because he's like, this helmet, I think it's probably hard to see out of the helmet, so it's maybe it was a trait that the stormtroopers got from Jango. Like,
is that really what he said, or is that just what you think?
That is quote. I can pull it up right now.
But dude, that doesn't make any. Okay, George, buddy, when Luke said, "I can't see in this," well, I think from what I've heard, actually, that was Mark Hamill saying that he genuinely couldn't see, but it worked in that moment because they stole stormtrooper outfits. So of course, the measurements wouldn't be 100%. Why would Jango be wearing this armor that was custom made for him and he can't see out of the helmet? All because you wanted to do a callback. Yeah. Come on. What?
So he thought it would be funny. Because just looking at it, he's like, yeah, it's probably hard to see out of that. And it is. So I think that's just hilarious. It's just the fun of these movies. It's, what a callback, that little bump. So then we go into the space portion, which is a huge callback to Empire. I think retroactively, this makes Empire more interesting to me when I watch it because he obviously, as Obi-Wan puts the tracker on Slave One, follows it into space, and they get into a battle, right? I believe they get into a battle over Geonosis.
Yeah, it's basically them chasing each other, and then I love the sound design.
Oh, of course.
When Obi-Wan fires the thing, it's it's silent, and then it's I can't replicate it, but it's so good.
So this is one of those,
Obi-Wan hiding behind the asteroid, and then when Jango flies away, he starts pursuing it.
That happens exactly in Empire with Slave One. So what's funny is I gotta cut in. What's funny is Boba was in Slave One in Attack of the Clones when Obi-Wan did this, and he does the exact same maneuver to find and follow and catch the Falcon in Empire. And it's not just with the hiding in the asteroid; it's a lot of other aspects of this space battle where obviously George was copying exactly what he did in Empire in Attack of the Clones, but he does that because Boba is a child and sees how Obi-Wan does that, and then in turn uses that knowledge in Empire, if you're talking about in context of the story, to catch the Falcon. Yeah, love it.
It's basically it reminds me of Arkham Knight when you're riding in the Batmobile and you could make it crawl on these legs and quietly walk around. It's weird seeing this large vehicle being stealthy, but it's such a creative thing. He's flying a ship, but he could still manage to be stealthy. It's just a small
such a weirdly designed ship too.
Yeah.
But in terms of the design, this is another moment in the Phantom Menace with the pod racing where there was no music, and he really just let the sound design take over and have a huge impact. I mean, with all these movies, there's so much diversity between the soundtrack, the music, the score, the VFX, the sound effects, the styles of filmmaking, the different styles he uses, the dialogue, the exposition. I mean, there's so much diversity, and I think a lot of it for a lot of people, a lot of it doesn't pay off. But personally, I love this style. I love George's style. I love the whole blending of ideas. Even Star Wars, it's a science fantasy genre, because fantasy, it involves magic and monsters and mythical creatures. Science fiction is more of like a Star Trek with futuristic, advanced type of technologies. Star Wars blends both of them, and I love it. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the blending of genres, blending of techniques and styles and ideas. I love it, and
yeah, me too.
I just love it. So we get to what this is the space battle. He ends up getting away and traveling and landing in Geonosis. So before we wrap up the Obi-Wan section, anything else you want to say, and then we'll jump into Padme and Anakin.
Wait, let me find my notes about Geonosis. Okay, so for for the other planets we visited in this movie so far, they've all been like creative and cool. Geonosis is just like a planet-sized Grand Canyon. Like it's nothing. It's not it's not bad, but like
do you know what it is?
A few things that I like. Like all the people sitting at the table having the meeting and like speaking their various languages.
I do love that.
I love the like robot dude that speaks in that weird way. That's
the techno droid something.
Yeah, it's like wow, 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 wow.
And
like
then
it's
it
just
slowly
such
turns into like English.
Yeah, it's like another thing. Like George writing this, I imagine maybe he had at least one draft where it was just like like aliens speaking English or other languages, and that's it. But then he's like, what if I had a guy who was like a machine and he like spoke like in like static language? That'd be interesting, and then he just did it, and it's like, I love you, Joe. Like I got problems with you, but I freaking love you. I want you to be my grandfather.
Yeah. So hold on. Because let's start Geonosis for Act 3, but Obi-Wan lands on Geonosis, and what I will say is Geonosis, actually, I never realized this until listening to the commentary. Geonosis is a callback to Flash Gordon, because it's like a hive mind for the bug type creatures, and when you see the wall that's just covered,
I do love those.
The bug creatures just come out of the wall, and he said that he did that specifically to call back to Flash Gordon with the rock creatures coming out of the wall. Which George always wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie, so obviously the callbacks are there.
If it wasn't for Flash Gordon and him not being able to make a Flash Gordon movie, we wouldn't have Star Wars. As I'll probably say a few more times, but I'm just really thankful that happened.
Yeah. So that's the end of the Obi-Wan section. He arrives on Geonosis, and that obviously it's going to tie into the Padme Anakin story. But we'll go back now to when Padme and Anakin arrive on Naboo, because obviously he's bodyguarding her. She's, going to get assassinated. So she needs a Jedi that's there to protect her. And of course, it's Anakin. They arrive on Naboo. This is an interesting place, because George said he actually visited there on vacation one time, saw the actual lake that was there in Spain, and wanted to shoot there.
Is that where he shot it in Spain?
Yeah, I believe so. Naboo was shot. No. Everything for Naboo was on location in Spain.
Oh, wow! Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. Really, really interesting planet. It's. I love the visuals.
Yeah,
it's
like
it's
every awesome. Like it's such a like. It feels like a location out of like, like a Victorian or like classic like romance movie.
And I'm glad you said that. Because
obviously,
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, because obviously, and George said that he was there on vacation, saw the lake, and he's like, these two are coming back here because it is like the most romantic place ever for these two.
Yeah.
So obviously they show up here, and the rest is history. Go ahead. What do you have, and what do you think about this whole Naboo section with Padme and Anakin?
Let's see. What do I? All right, so I think I'll start. Yeah, I'll start where when they're having the meeting with the politicians. I don't remember
Mm,
exactly what they said, but
yeah.
like they were talking about like the one guy says something about like Anakin being a Jedi Master or something, and then she's like, "Oh, he's
No,
still
he's a Padawan.
he's still just a Padawan." Yeah, and then Anakin gets insecure and like like tries to like uh jump into the conversation, and then Padme's like, excuse me, shut the hell up, buddy." And then Anakin's like, "I'm sorry, my lady." Like I used to not like this moment, but watching it now, it's like I kind of understand why he'd be pissed because like like I'm sure like if it was you, like say like you were with your wife, and like you had a similar encounter like that, and she said something like that, I'm sure you would like feel like insecure about it, and it's like, oh, I I better like like try and show that I'm like headstrong and tough and stuff, because like he's still just that like little kid on the inside, and like like he like
But
this and Revenge of the Sith are about him wanting to be a Jedi Master. So for the woman he loves to say no, he's not a Jedi Master, like somebody
that hurts.
uplifted
Yeah.
him to a status that he wasn't at, and then she's like, "Oh no, his real position's lower than that." And then he's like, "Excuse me," and then she's like, "No, shut up." And then he's like, like he doesn't want to be rude, but he's obviously mad about it. So it's like, I feel like it's a pretty moment of natural tension with him,
And
I'd probably react that way too.
yeah, exactly. It's real, and we have a lot of different moments like this in the movie. And man, I got so much to say. We got a little bit more to talk about with these two, but you're right. That moment was intentional. All I want George intended for it to be this way.
Yeah.
And okay, we just got to keep going. We'll get there. So they have this discussion in there. He kind of shuts her down. At this point, she sees him more as a bodyguard, and he obviously still has these feelings for her.
Yeah.
So eventually they get to the point where he confesses his feelings for her. And I think how George put it, that Anakin put his hand on her and she didn't like push him away. So he took that as her also having feelings for him back. So
And then
let's talk. Yeah, talk a little bit about. Yeah, talk a little bit about from after that initial meeting where they have from there till the end of the Naboo sequence where he has that dream about his mother.
I'm gonna go because at the end of this, I want to kind of like wrap up like my whole thoughts about like their romance and stuff. Okay, so I'll just start from when they're talking, and then Hayden Christensen gives the Oscar-nominated line, "I don't like sand. It's coarse, irritating, and it gets everywhere," which has been memed to infinity and beyond.
Do you like that?
You know what? You know what? It's actually because before that, she was talking about like when she was in school or whatever, and like her class took a trip to the beach, and like she had this like privileged upbringing, and then he's talking about how he hates sand because his life sucked and he was a slave on a desert planet. So I love that little juxtaposition. Like it's not just him saying something dumb. Really, it's more like him essentially saying, "I can't relate to that because my life sucked."
Yeah, let me butt in here.
I think that's pretty good.
It is, and he's at this point he's a kid, and even though he might be the age he is, think about his emotional, and mental growth, and it being kind of almost stunted by just living the life he lived as a slave. It turned Jedi. You know what I mean? In this moment, he might not know how to express that. Those thoughts by just saying that he doesn't like sand because all he can think about are the sands of Tatooine when he was a slave. And I saw somebody on Twitter explain this moment. You might have saw it, and it was like this was what was really being said in that moment. It was, Padme, I didn't live a privileged life like you did as a queen going on nice vacations to the beach. I was living my life as a slave on Tatooine, waking up every day to the sand knowing that I wasn't free. And now to be away from that, seeing it reminds me of, my life as a slave. So I don't know. I like the acting in that. I think it was meant to be so awkward and cringy, but it wasn't bad. I mean, it just, it wasn't bad. I like the juxtaposition of what he was saying, but also the juxtaposition of their acting between the two. I really like Natalie Portman as Padme. She's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely.
Same with Hayden Christensen as Anakin. And it's mostly because of kind of the way they, like I said, they're juxtaposed, how they complement each other, how Anakin's like this, Padme's like this, but if Padme's like this, Anakin's like this. And I just want to butt in real quick here. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, there's a video version where I'm doing something with my hands. So I'm just going to plug that right here because we're going to start doing videos for some of these episodes and it'll be on YouTube and Spotify. The rest will be audio. But I was basically just moving my hands up and down, but I'll plug that here because why not? I'm trying to do a little bit less housekeeping with the episodes where we just get more into the content and we don't talk about, stuff that doesn't pertain to the topic. So I'm trying to do less of that and kind of save it for the end. I think these episodes have been going great and I just want to plug that here. So what do you think about that section?
I'm not a fan of the kiss. I don't feel like it makes sense. Like, I don't feel like there's a reason necessarily why she would kiss him in that moment. Like, if anything, I feel like he would have tried to kiss her and then she would have been like, what are you doing? Like that. I love the moment where they're in the fields and they're having that conversation where, like, he's talking about, like, his philosophy of, like politics should just be, like, people talking and then, like, trying to decide what's best for everyone. And then she's like, well, that's what we try to do. But the problem is that, like, not everybody agrees or something. And then he says the most Vader ass thing.
Here we go.
They should be made to. And then I love that moment where she's, like, reacting, like, and then he has this, like, really stern look on his face. I don't know. She's like, that sounds like a dictatorship. And then he's like, what's wrong with that? And then she's, like, kind of, like, freaked out. And then he starts laughing. And then she starts laughing. And it's just like, oh, they were just joking. Here's my take. I don't think he was joking.
No.
I think he was being serious and then just played it off like, I don't actually believe in dictatorships. Yeah. But we see what he becomes. So it's like I feel like that was always present in him and it just grows more and more, especially in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. This is where George starts to bring out Vader. Because you got to realize Vader and Anakin are the same person. And we all know that, obviously. But it's not like Anakin turned to Vader and Vader turned back to Anakin. Vader has always been there in Anakin.
Yeah.
And Anakin was always there in Vader. It's more, I think it's more subtle and complex than I think we make it out to be sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'll explain more of that when we get to Tatooine. So if you want, we can jump there now because what happens is we actually find this out at the beginning of the movie that Anakin has been struggling with nightmares about his mother. So he has another one while he's here on Naboo with Padme. And Padme is like, well, Tatooine's not that far. Let's go. So Anakin and Padme go to...
Wait, do you mind if I jump in real quick and just bring up one thing? Okay, so when they're having that conversation about, like, like that, like, you start to see that, like, she does have feelings for him.
Yeah.
But she's like, like, we can't do it. I'm a senator. You're a Jedi. Yeah. And then Anakin's basically like, well, we could just keep it a secret. and then bookmark this thing that I'm about to say, and then remember it when we talk about Revenge of the Sith. She says, "It'll take us to a place we cannot go." Just put that in your back pocket, because I'm going to bring it up next episode, and I never noticed it until I rewatched this, and I'm like, that is some damn good narrative poetry. That is some damn good poetry.
I'm going to use this paper for any questions we have. Don't ask why I have this. Hold on. Yeah, video versions are fun, man.
So, and then,
if you're not watching video for this episode, go to YouTube or Spotify.
You're really missing out.
You're really missing out on this one. So, what did you just say?
Okay, so remember this, because I'm going to reference it again when we talk about Revenge of the Sith. When he said, he basically like, we can be together, we could just keep it a secret, you know? And then she's like, you know, like, that would be a bad idea. It'll take us to a place we cannot go. Just remember that. Put that in your back pocket.
The reason I'm doing this right now is for that, but also for another moment in this movie that you may not be thinking about right now. Okay. There's another moment where this comes up. This pen is out of ink. It's out of ink, but I wrote down something. Okay.
Okay. So then, point. And then Anakin having visions of his mom, and then that's why they fly to Tatooine. Who else in Star Wars had visions of bad things happening that led them to make an impulsive journey that ended up in them losing a limb? Luke Skywalker, Anakin's son. It's like poetry, so that it
rhymes.
Beautiful.
Well, I love that they make Anakin have that ability to sense what's going to happen in the future, because that's what actually happened to Luke. So you get to see that they're going down the same paths like Luke, or like George said, but at certain points,
check this out.
They deviate.
I didn't see that I wrote this down, but Anakin having visions like Luke, same consequences, like, but different outcome, you know. Luke gained a parent in Return of the Jedi because he saves Anakin from the dark side.
Yeah.
Anakin loses a parent.
Wow, that's actually a really good parallel right there, to where what George was saying, at certain critical points they deviate in the path that they're on, because they're both on similar paths. But I think that's a good point that you bring up with them, because obviously Anakin losing his mother is just such a catalyst for him turning, which we'll get into.
Yeah, definitely.
But first, he arrives at the Lars homestead. And it's cool because George really wanted to show off the Lars homestead in this, because we see it again in A New Hope. And he said he really wanted to focus on parts like the kitchen, what was it, like the garage or whatever, the certain parts that we do see in A New Hope. So what do you think about the Lars homestead and everything leading up to obviously meeting a stepbrother and the family, the Lars family, leading up to him going to save his mother?
Well, actually, this whole thing is one of my biggest problems with the prequels, because if you recall in A New Hope, when Obi-Wan's talking to Luke, he's saying, Anakin's brother, your Uncle Owen thought that Anakin shouldn't have gotten involved with the Jedi. So when you hear that, you think, oh, okay, well, Owen was actually Anakin's brother, because that's what we were led to believe, and they don't say anything otherwise throughout the whole trilogy. So he probably was like, hey, bro, I don't think you should join the Jedi for whatever reasons. But in this, like, Anakin doesn't meet Owen until they're both grown men and they barely interact. So it's like, I feel like if they would have been, like, I remember one time I was, like, talking to you, not on an episode, but, like, I think Phantom Menace should have been, like, it should have had, because the prequels were showing famous characters as kids. Yeah. Oh. So when Anakin brings Qui-Gon and crew into his house, there should have been a moment where he's like, "Oh, this is my baby brother Owen." So have them actually be brothers. So then when Anakin returns home in this movie, it hits hard because he's reuniting with his estranged brother. But instead, this moment that should mean something in this movie just feels like pure fan service. Like, oh, I'm Owen Lars. This is my dad who's the Lars. This is my wife Shmi. We're in the next trilogy. Cool, huh? All right, bye.
I like that. I think they could still keep what's his name, Paul or something like that, as the stepdad, but actually have Owen as the legitimate brother that was with Shmi and who was also a slave like Anakin, because another aspect of that would have been that Anakin didn't just leave his mother in slavery, but he also would have left his brother in slavery. So yes, it would have been Anakin returning to his estranged brother, but his brother would have had contentment towards the Jedi for taking him away, which would have led to him not approving of Luke becoming a Jedi, which we see in Kenobi.
I literally have this whole pitch. I don't want to get too into it, but basically, like, that would make their mom dying hit harder, because then it's like, oh, if you wouldn't have, left to become a Jedi and try to be a big shot hero, you could have been here to help me save mom, but I was by myself, so I hate you. And then that would have been the thing that, like, finally severs their bond forever.
And not just severs their bond, but also that will give more characterization to Anakin, because that will make him have more contentment for the Jedi, even. Yeah, because he does anyways. Because we can actually get into it. They leave the Anakin leaves the Lars homestead. He's on his way walking out, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm going to save my mother."
Oh, dude, real quick. Props to Hayden Christensen. His performance when he learns what happened to his mom. He doesn't say anything, but you could tell on his face, like, he's angry, he's confused, he's sad. He's, like, he shows such a range by not saying anything. It's a great performance.
And you can tell that he wants to just lay into them, but you can see that his stepdad is obviously handicapped because when the Raiders attacked, they injured him, and he said that he said it was like a month ago. Anyways, those are the details, but he says, okay. He gets up, walks away. They ask him. He said, I'm going to find my mother, save my mother. This is before he leaves. Padme does come up to him, and they're standing outside. Yeah. Okay. Now
I forget exactly.
I'm trying to get
what
the timeline mixed up.
But yeah.
Okay. So George describes this as a callback to A New Hope when Luke was looking out at the dual sunset, and he describes it as, you can tell there's something foreboding about to happen in the near future. And also, I noticed this watching it back last week. It is an exact picture of the Vader promotional poster for the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, like, it's like shown partially in their shadows. Yes. And then I think it's not until their shadows like intersect that it looks like how Vader looks with his helmet and his cape.
So like I saw that and I was like, I never realized that. But this is really where Vader's born. And I also
it's almost like here's a little tease at something I'm gonna talk about later to wrap up this whole part of the story. It's almost like Padme and Anakin's romance is at least partially what makes him Darth Vader. It's almost like that's what George is trying to do or something.
So let me go a little deeper than this, because I don't remember their shadows like intersecting exactly.
I mean, like, because like she walks up to him and then it's basically like a melding of their shadows, I think.
Well, you see both of their shadows.
Yeah.
And
I could be wrong.
What I thought of, either way, you see both their shadows on there, and it's reminiscent of that poster, like we said, but also it's reminiscent of the shadow of him for Darth Vader. And there's two of them, and her shadow looked like a cloaked figure, which I was taking as Emperor Palpatine. Oh. And not that she, obviously, not that she is, but I thought about the rule of two. And, I know the history of why the Sith made the rule of two. And what's funny is there's actually like the real rule of two for Anakin is with him and Padme.
Yeah.
Before he was in that master apprentice role with the Emperor, he was in that with Padme. And she, like you said, when they were at the meeting on Naboo, she shuts him down immediately whenever he says something. And then when they're on the ship about to leave after his mother dies, he says that, no, we're not going to save Obi-Wan because I'm supposed to be watching you and we're not going to get you into danger.
Yeah.
And then she says, well, you can protect me while I go save Obi-Wan. And she's like, what, you're not going to argue with me? And he's like, I've learned not to argue with you. But it's out of
he
love.
Follows her,
it's not
and
out
she
of
follows him.
It's not. But this relationship. I mean, they end up getting married at the end of this. Their relationship is essentially that, bond of two. And what happens is his fear of losing that leads him to Emperor Palpatine in the next movie.
Yeah.
So we can actually get into that in the next movie, but basically, this is the inception of not just Vader, but the reason why he turns to Vader, and it is the love for Padme.
Yeah.
And you get to see that right here with Padme being there when his mother dies, because his mother, like I said at the beginning, was one of those three connections. So now you're losing that first connection. He's losing that connection with his mother, which obviously this is one of the most important moments in the entire saga right here. And when he gets on a speeder to go save his mother, and I believe what I was going to say is that they played Duel of the Fates as he's riding out to save his mother, which is obviously a very like symbolic song for the prequels in the saga. So this is the inception of the bond between him and Padme.
Yeah.
They're playing it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this that shows how significant this is, and what happens when he loses his mother. Yeah. This is leading him down the path to become Vader, but not just leading him down the path to become Vader, but leading him down the path to be with Padme, because Padme comforts him after this. He comes back with his mother. They have the burial. He's in the homestead, and he's throwing kind of a tantrum. He's throwing things, and she comes and calms him down.
Yeah,
go ahead.
This is one of my other problems, is that Padme's reaction never made sense to me. It's way too calm. Like, he's having a meltdown about how he murdered a bunch of the raiders, not just the men, but the women and the children too. And she's like, she's reacting to it as if he's just saying, oh, I yelled at Obi-Wan because I got mad. And then she's like, it's human to be angry. And it's like, bro, he's telling you that he murdered a bunch of people in vengeance, and you're reacting way too calmly, Padme. What is wrong with you? Are you kind of a psychopath? Like,
see,
what?
I thought that too. I thought it was a weird reaction to that whole "I killed them," not just the men, but this is what I thought, and this is why I brought up this whole thing about that. This is the inception of them too, because I saw her as she had to respond the complete opposite of that to balance him out. And that's something a significant other does. So this was like the unspoken, moment of them realizing that they love each other. And you only get the validation of this from this point on in the movie. And then I wrote down on my paper, the arena. And that is such an underrated moment between them, between the two of them, that we'll get into. But the way she responds is weird. But think about it in terms of like a husband and a wife. She was more concerned. Listen, she was more concerned with being there and comforting him and helping him than being concerned with the fact that he just killed the men, the women, and the children.
I mean, I think part of it has to do with the fact that like the Raiders are just, these like objectively bad people. Because in Revenge of the Sith, when she finds out what he did to like, people in power and stuff, she's like rightly horrified by it. So you could see it as like the only reason that she isn't like really, really turned off and scared by it is because he's like, it'd be like, I feel like if you told your wife that oh, this group of criminals kidnapped my mom and then she died while she was in captivity and I freaked out and I killed them. I think she would obviously be like, worried about that, but she'd be like, oh, well, they were criminals. So, I mean,
Yeah.
whatever.
And that's what I was thinking. And just real quick about the Raiders, we obviously see the Raiders in episode 4, but we don't, if you're watching it in, as George puts it, the correct order, 1, 2, whatever, so on. We don't know that they're not human. In this, we see that they are more monsters. In this, we see that they're bad people, like you say. So that is a little bit more forgivable. Yeah. And then this same kind of thing comes up in episode 3. Obviously, let's just not go there. But it comes up in episode 3. But in this, that's how I view it. I think this is one of the best scenes in Star Wars. This whole moment.
Yeah, I think it's all right. I don't hate it anymore. Like I've learned to kind of see it a little differently.
All right, so we talked about how he the fallout after that. She comforts him, and then they get the distress beacon from Obi-Wan from Geonosis, and he follows her. He follows her there to protect her as they both go to save Obi-Wan. So from here on out, get into your thoughts on the last act, the third act. This is all kinds of action, as George puts it. This is when they walk in to the dragon's cave with Geonosis, the battle, everything.
Yeah, it was really it was a really interesting stylistic choice of George to include a Three Stooges sketch in the third act of his movie. That they're like on the.
Did you like it?
No.
Oh, come on.
It feels like a video game. Like it's
okay.
like
it's an art. This is an R2
movie
moment.
Stops dead for this like video game Three Stooges sketch comedy ass moment.
This whole 20-minute sequence was to show that R2 is the hero. That was it.
It's so weird.
It was a cliffhanger. Oh, did he lose his arm? No, he didn't lose his arm, but he did lose his lightsaber.
I do like the callback of Padme kissing Anakin on the cheek, like Leia kissing Luke on the cheek. I thought that was an interesting callback.
Are you talking about when they were going into the arena?
No. There's a moment where isn't there a moment where they're like on the belt or something, and like she.
Oh yeah, that is a callback.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, she kissed him on the cheek. I don't remember exactly what happens.
That's a good callback.
I guess the only other thing until we get to the third act fight is that Jar Jar ruined everything.
He did, and
Jar Jar's fault.
Yeah. And I'm glad I kind of talked about it at the beginning.
I hope you're proud of yourself. Damn it.
But he did. He gave him the power. So we get into the arena, and I love this part because they obviously get captured on their way to save Obi-Wan, and they have this short exchange as they're waiting to be pulled out into the arena to be basically killed for sport in front of the.
I want to know your opinion on this then, on some.
I love this part. This movie just keeps going up there in the ranks for me in terms of Star Wars movies. And every time I watch it, I notice more things. I just end up liking it more and more. I guess I'm appreciating this movie more and more as I get older, not just because of the nostalgia I had for it, but just because of everything I'm seeing from it. And the arena is one of those moments. And I love the song, Love Pledge in the Arena. That's one of my favorite songs in Star Wars. And they have this little exchange here where Padme's now confessing her love for Anakin. And Anakin has the same reservations that you brought up earlier that Padme had about him, saying that you're a senator, I'm a Jedi. And Padme's response is, well, what does it matter? We're about to die anyways. And they realize that they love each other and nothing is going to stand in the way. And this is, I think, the end of that moment that started. You know, they obviously have the Three Stooges skit in between there, but When you get to from the death of his mother to now, presumably the death of both of them, that you see that they're, it's them two now. It is now Anakin and Padme, and this is where attachment goes to the next level. And this is what the Jedi were trying to keep, the Jedi Order was trying to keep the Jedi away from, creating attachments like this, because it only leads to fear, to greed, and then to revenge. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because at first he's the one pursuing her, and then eventually, like, he like wises up and he's like, no, she's right. I can't do this. I'm just gonna, stay focused, and like, we can be close friends, but like, he starts accepting his responsibilities and growing. But now she's on the opposite end, pursuing him, and then, like, I feel like, here's my theory: he was on the path to the dark side, especially after he killed the Tusken Raiders. But I feel like him becoming Vader and fully going to the dark side is kind of her fault, because she pulled him off of that right path. Because if you notice, when she says, I love you, he's not like, oh my God, I'm so happy to hear you say that.
I don't even think he says it back.
No, he's like, what? But we can't do, you said we can't. And then she's like, it doesn't matter. I love you. So there's a lot of push and pull with them. And then, but in the end, it's her that entices him, and then those feelings for him come up again. And then
I won't say it's her fault.
I mean, it's not totally her fault, but she has something
She's
to do
catalyst.
with it. Yeah, it's partially her, but not all.
And that's what I was trying to say. This is the like I said, this is the inception of when he truly will become Vader. It's because of this not just this attachment, but the loss and the fear and the anger and the greed, everything that Yoda actually talks about. So,
do you think,
I agree with you,
this is gonna kind of lead into my big summary of their whole love story later? But do you believe that she really loved him?
I don't know.
Okay, interesting. Because I kind of don't really, but I feel like that's the point.
I'll say this. I think
specify later.
I think obviously she does, because that's the story. But I'm thinking of in terms of, did they pull it off? I don't think. I think it could have been pulled off better.
Yeah.
But I think so. If you think about it, think about how large. Think about, just the Earth, how many people there are. Now expand that to the galaxy. You know what I mean? And especially a queen, a senator, and then a Jedi. You know what I mean? They chose each other, so I think that could have been represented better. But there's a certain story that has to be told in a time frame that I think it's good. For me, this is adequate. It's good. I like it. One reason I like this movie a lot. I think it's good.
Okay.
That aspect.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this gets fleshed out more though in Clone Wars, stuff like that, because season 7 of Clone Wars, it's funny, man. He's like, they're away in the Clone Wars, Anakin and Obi-Wan, and there's a part where Anakin is like basically FaceTiming Padme with the holograms and behind Obi-Wan's back, and then he like gets off with Padme, turns around, and Obi-Wan's there, and Obi-Wan sees, but Obi-Wan chooses to ignore it because he wants Anakin to be happy, and it's cool. It's there's characterization, and I think it helps with the relationship between all of that George wanted to flesh out in the Clone Wars series. That there was obviously restraints and all that in the movies, but yeah, so.
So the gladiator fight.
Love this part. The arena. Yeah,
it's like a classic gladiator fight on this planet. I I think it's cool, like them having to defend themselves against these large creatures without their lightsabers. Like
Yeah.
it shows again that it's what I want to see more of in Star Wars is like Jedi having to be resourceful when they're in danger and not just, oh, I'll just use the Force or I'll just use my lightsaber. Like, no, what happens when they can't do any of those things?
I don't even think they use the Force at all. They didn't have their sabers. Yeah.
I think maybe they do
much,
a tiny bit, but like, yeah,
trying to remember.
It's mostly just them being clever.
Anakin does to calm down the creature to get on him.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. But I like how capable Padme was. Because without even looking at Padme, Anakin thinks that she's not going to be able to handle it, and
she seems to be on top of things.
On top of it. So
I love that moment right before that where Obi-Wan sees them two being brought out to the arena, and then he's like, "Yeah, I was beginning to wonder if you got my message." And then Anakin's like a little pouty. He's like,
"So good.
We decided to come to rescue you," you know. And then he's like, "Well, good job." Like. Obi-Wan's so sassy.
Between,
dude. Like,
great job between idiot. Both of them. Both of them. Not just Obi-Wan's. Ewan's
yeah, like Anakin, again, to Hayden's credit, like he plays this like a son who like wanted to do something really good for one of his parents, but it backfired. He's like, well, I wanted to do this for you. And then the parent's like, well, you did it, did you? Great job. Yeah. Like it's, like a really relatable moment.
So great action sequence between the three characters. Love it. You get to see Dooku, Jango, Newt Gunray, and whatever the leader's name of the Geonosians is. You get to see him at the balcony, and in walks Mace Windu. And it's cool because Mace Windu, obviously played by Sam Jackson, was in the first movie, but he had such a small role.
Yeah.
And it's
he
cool
feels
because
full on Samuel L. Jackson here. He's like, this party's over. Like that's such a great one-liner.
Yeah, and obviously he wanted to be involved in Star Wars and wanted to have the action, but George had a certain story that he needed to follow, and he couldn't set up the Clone Wars and the Jedi fighting and until this movie. So it's cool how he did give Samuel L. Jackson that part, but he told him he had to play a smaller role in the Phantom Menace before he could actually get to this fighting scene in Attack of the Clones, and then obviously his fighting scene until when he dies in the third movie. But it's just cool how they had that connection and he committed to that. It was awesome seeing a purple lightsaber for the first time, and
it's weird that he's the only one who has one. So that makes me wonder. I just want like this will probably sound stupid, but I just hope that there's like a book or something where like Mace Windu chooses a purple crystal, and then the other Jedi are like, why are you choosing purple? And then he's like, I don't know, I just like purple. Shut up about it. Like,
So do you know why it's purple? It's technically amethyst. That's the color. Oh. But the reason it is because he I'm sorry. The reason I'm trying to think of in canon version, but I can't right now. I got it mixed up with the lightsaber form that he uses. He uses form 7, but the real life reason why he picked purple was just because he wanted it. Samuel Jackson literally just wanted purple. So I think that's awesome.
I think that's fun. Like it makes him stand out.
I just know so he uses form 7, and which form 7 channels the light side and dark side, and I want to say that's the reason for the crystal too. Is
red and blue, purple.
Yeah.
Maybe
is that reason? Because he isn't obviously a dark side user or whatever, but I
think in Revenge of the Sith you could argue that he kind of is, but he doesn't know.
He channels it. Yeah, he's obviously a Jedi, but he channels it in his fighting when he needs it. But yeah, so red and blue makes purple. Cool in canon context. So he obviously fights Jango. Jango whips out the flamethrower, lights him on fire. He jumps down, and we get to see all of the Jedi there ignite their lightsabers, and they land. And obviously the droid army shows up and corners them. It gets them into a circle right in the middle of the arena. And let's just talk about the story that happens. It's a cool fight, but the droids center them in the middle of the arena, and Dooku, he has them stop, and he says, you guys, you're just outnumbered. And they're just like, okay, well, it is what it is. We gotta do it. And bang, in comes
John
the
Cena.
clones.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, here comes here comes the clones. In comes the clones.
Yeah.
What did George relate this to? George related this to when Han showed up to rescue Luke in one of the movies. But yeah, so it's just one of those cliffhangers. Oh, what's going to happen? You'll find out next episode. But the clones come in. Yoda is riding on the drop ship, just commanding them around because obviously he can't do anything that we know of until the end. But what do you think about the introduction of the clones? Because I love these clones. These are the Phase 1 clone troopers. I love them.
I like the armor that they wear.
Yeah,
I've always thought that was cool. I like the ship. I just had this thought of Yoda showing up to Kamino and saying, "Okay, clones, now's finally your time to shine," And then at least one of them just looking at him as he approaches them, he's like, he's a Jedi Master, just he must have gave them a rousing speech for them to I mean, that was their purpose, but it's just a fun little thing of Yoda being okay, it's time to go. It is
time to kill these Sith. It is. So I love the introduction of the clones so much. So pandemonium breaks out, and they all the Separatists begin to leave, and two things happen. Jango jumps down to kill Windu, and we know how that goes.
Yeah, him and his son both die like stupid people. I don't know what's up with that. Dude, what's I want to know what was going through Jango's mind. Fire. He's reflecting. He's reflecting. He's reflecting. What do I do? Should I keep shooting? And I'm dead. Bro, do you not have grenades? Do you not have anything else you can use? Roll out of the way. Why are you just standing there?
So you got to watch close, and I hate how the way this was done because it doesn't look like it was intentional, but it was. When he gets hit by that creature that Anakin was fighting, and he tramples over him. When Jango's rolling, you see his jetpack get damaged, and you can see the sparks from it. And George specifically made the sparks more visible in the DVD version because you can physically see Jango try to fire his rockets at Mace Windu when Mace Windu's running at him, but the sparks start to happen on his jetpack because it was damaged from that creature.
I mean, but he still could have rolled out of the way or something. Instead, he could stands there and does nothing.
So he gets decapitated. You know how that goes. Boba goes, picks up the helmet. That's a cool shot too.
That's a brutal shot, dude. Wasn't there?
It's tough.
This might be a Mandela effect, but wasn't there a version where
the head comes out?
Yeah. I swear there might have. I don't know. I kind of think this is all Barry Allen's fault. Screwing with the space time.
This is it might be a Mandela effect. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to get caught up on that because that's trippy. So Jango dies. We get to see Mace, and he has this intense look. Does he look at Boba after he kills his father? That stare down was brutal. That just the look in Mace Windu's face after that. He was savage. But anyways, regardless, like I said, two things happened. Did you catch the second thing that happened when the Separatists were leaving? I actually love this. I love this moment. Such a cool detail because
they show are you talking about when Count Dooku goes inside of the place and then he says to the one guy, the one guy's like, "Hey, we need to leave before they find out about our secret weapon," and then it's a blueprint of a prototype of the Death Star, and it's like, hey, the Death Star, because this whole saga doesn't focus enough on the freaking Death Star. It's like we just had to see it in this movie.
Well, the Geonosians are, as George puts it, the what do you want to call them? the people that just build things.
The architects?
They build the. I don't know if you use that word, but essentially they were the architects of this. They built the droids for the Separatists. So he said you can imagine that the Emperor commissioned or he said contracted the Geonosians to build the Death Star, and I like that. He gave him the plans, which you get to see Dooku deliver to Palpatine in Coruscant at the end of the movie.
I will say this though, for as much as either something similar to the Death Star or the actual Death Star show up in some of the other movies, which is really weird, and I'll talk about in future episodes. It being presented how it is in this movie at least makes sense, because it's like, of course they would have been working on this weapon because they're trying to form their own, union. Whereas, like, in other movies, it's like, hey, do you remember the Death Star? Well, we have something that's like the Death Star because we don't have any creativity. Like,
this Death Star destroys more planets.
Star Killer Base, I'm looking at you. That was...
I hated that.
I like that sequence, but it's stupid.
All right.
Anyway,
we could go on a tangent with that. We're going on a lot of tangents, but I don't care because this is we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. There's no rules.
You're not my mom.
So, I am your father.
No.
So, he gets the plans, and as he's leaving, I like the whole sequence with it's because it feels like a video game. It reminds me a lot of Battlefront. Star Wars Battlefront.
You're talking about the lightsaber duel?
No, before that, when they're chasing Count Dooku down, you get to see the ship of in the ship there was Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme, and in another ship. It's not confirmed that it was Commander Cody, but I want to say it was. And Yoda. And it's cool because you get to see them, and Yoda's like what is it? He said target the destroyers, you will. And they like start firing at all of the starships, and you get to see like just the Clone Wars, you know what I mean, like the Pandemonium. This is like the first battle of the Clone Wars, and all the Jedi are there, the clones are there, all the Separatists. It's cool. It's you get to see them destroy everything. I love the visuals of it. But then towards the end of this section, George actually added this post, like after the whole movie was done. He went in and did reshoots with Ewan and Hayden for this specific section, and it's reminiscent of at the beginning of the movie, something you were talking about. It's when Padme falls out of the ship. She falls out of the ship and rolls, and Anakin starts freaking out. He's like, we got to turn around. We got to save her. And Obi-Wan's like, if you jump out or you go save her, you will be expelled from the Jedi Order. So
I don't know why
think with your head.
This whole scene has always been unintentionally funny to me. Like, the way Ewan is just, like, shouting. Like, he's like, you'll be expelled from the Jedi Order.
You'll be expelled from the Jedi Order.
Like he's just like Obi-Wan's just, like, so tired of Anakin's shit and just, like, yelling at him over the top as hell. And then Anakin's like, fine. Like, it's such a laughable, like, it's one of the sequences that I will meme because it wasn't executed. Like, I don't know why George chose those specific takes, but
yeah.
I'm not
probably just because of reshoots, but
yeah.
I agree. So last part of the movie, and then we'll get out of here. The duel. And it's funny because at this point, George was like, yeah, these movies are known for their duels. So I guess you got to have a duel at the end of every movie now.
In my opinion, this is one of the worst ones in the whole saga, honestly.
Here's my take. This is one of the worst ones, but it's also one of my favorite ones in the whole saga. Just because when I was growing up, just nostalgia, I always loved this movie because of Yoda. I love Yoda in this, and we'll get to that because George talks about it, and I want to end with Yoda versus Dooku.
Some opinions about that, kind of.
Okay, so let's start with the Obi-Wan Anakin versus Dooku. So it was funny because he's actually juggling 3 different fights here. The first one is essentially Obi-Wan versus Dooku. because Dooku kind of makes quick work of Anakin, and then
I think the Obi-Wan fighting him is actually not that bad, but then it kind of goes downhill.
Yeah, that one was short, and really he's trying to tell a story here through the fighting, and it's more of, I don't know, man, this is more of like visual dialogue than anything, because it's not how do you describe it? He said it wasn't a fighting sequence. He described it as something else. This wasn't meant to be your typical duel. So anyways, he makes quick work of Anakin. Obi-Wan fights him, and then he makes kind of quick work of Obi-Wan and throws the thing on him, kind of stops him, and Obi-Wan throws Anakin his lightsaber, and this is the first time we see somebody really fight with dual sabers. So that was cool.
I like, like you talk about like poetry throughout the writing and stuff, and like visual storytelling. Anakin using his blue lightsaber, and he's also using a green lightsaber. And who eventually uses a green lightsaber? His son.
Yeah. I like that. And then it's also a callback to him fighting his son in Return of the Jedi, because George intentionally made him want to cut the cord for the lights and have this light be in the battle, have this battle be in the dark.
I think that was a great idea, but
the
execution's really weird. Like, it's shot really weird, and
it's basically shot like bad. Yeah,
like it's just like shot like Ewan and
like,
Christopher Lee just like standing there awkwardly, like flailing their sabers. Like it. I get what George wanted to do, and that's cool, but it's
I agree with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like shots of just their face, and then it'll pan to the other one.
Yeah, like
you
it's
don't
clear
see the
that
sabers.
Christopher Lee didn't do any stunt work or something, and they had to edit around him, and it's really obvious. What
a great actor, though. We didn't talk about his monologue with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, dude, which was
a great monologue.
He's talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I know the Senate's corrupt. Qui-Gon was my teacher, and you kind of remind me of him." And then he gives Obi-Wan the chance to join him, and then you could tell, like, it seems like Obi-Wan was kind of maybe thinking about what he was saying, but then he's like, "No, you're wrong."
Because he thinks about what he's saying, because he says, "Oh, I wish you forget your master was my apprentice at one point, and I wish Qui-Gon was here right now because he could help me a great deal." And that when he says that, Obi-Wan pauses for a second, then he's like, "No."
It makes you wonder how that would have went down if Qui-Gon wouldn't have died, and he would have been with him. Maybe that would have gone, like, maybe Count Dooku, seeing his old Padawan, would have, like, maybe joined with them again, like to maybe turn
it's
on
one
the
of the coolest
like
what ifs.
Yeah,
it definitely is. But
or what if
Christopher Lee, man?
What
a guy?
What if Obi-Wan accepted Count Dooku's offer?
Yeah,
but then he would have found out about the Emperor sooner. So, but I mean,
that's like what I sent you earlier. The what if Luke joined Vader?
Yeah,
that was funny. So, all right, Christopher Lee, man, what a guy. So at this point, he makes quick work of really both of them, even with when Anakin had two sabers, and then in walks the Grand Master himself, Yoda, and Frank Oz, man, what a performance! Because when Yoda walks in, tell me if I'm wrong. When Yoda walks in, you get a sense of like, whoa, this is what we've been waiting for,
and
I love that 4, almost 5 movies.
I love that it starts out with them using the Force, and then Count Dooku's like, "We can't settle this with the Force," because what does Yoda say in Empire Strikes Back? "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. War not make one great." So Yoda has always been like, how powerful you are with the Force, that's what matters. Everything else, it really doesn't matter. Stop worrying about it so much.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
wow, that's so interesting. Yeah.
I still don't love Yoda using a lightsaber, but I've changed my opinion a little bit to where it's like, it's a little stupid how he needs a cane to walk, but then he could tap into the Force and jump around and walk perfectly fine, but then after the battle, he can't walk again. But
Yeah,
I've
it's weird.
seen
They
it.
made him use.
I've like learned to see it as like Yoda uses his lightsaber when he has to, but if he doesn't have to, then he prefers to not do it because in his mind, that's not what makes a Jedi great. Unlike Obi-Wan, when him and Anakin are chasing the changeling, Obi-Wan gives him back his lightsaber, and then he's like, "This weapon is your life. Protect it." So
Yeah,
Obi-Wan's mind is like, lightsaber is really important. Yoda's like, nah, not really.
and what's crazy is, man, what's crazy is Obi-Wan. You got to read. I forget what book it is, man. I want to say Master and Apprentice. Um, Obi-Wan was not known for his midichlorian counter's force abilities. He was known for his dueling, and he uses Form 3, which
Oh,
is the most defensive form. So to him, it's like you got to have your lightsaber because
yeah.
without it, But then Yoda, Yoda uses Form 4, which is a very like acrobatic style. It's the same one Qui-Gon uses. But Yoda's so powerful with the Force because obviously his midichlorian count is so high that he doesn't need a lightsaber. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which while I'm talking about forms, Dooku's form is cool. He uses Form 2, which is like a classic, like fencing form, like dual form,
I love how George
which fits
created
his
like
character.
specific fighting styles and stances for
I
all
love
the
it.
different Jedi. Like
Yes.
he could have easily just had them all use basically the same technique, but he made the effort to be like, no, they all have a specific way they hold the lightsaber, a specific way their lightsabers look, a specific way that they move when they're fighting. Like it's like
Yes.
really creative and passion filled storytelling.
Yeah. And like I think Maul and Windu both used Form 7, which was a form. It was very aggressive, but you tapped it a little bit into the dark side when you used it, which I think is interesting. Um, Anakin and Luke both used the same one, and they used Form 5.
Ah.
But here's the cool thing: they both used two different variations of that form. Um, Anakin's was a more aggressive form. Luke's was a more defensive form.
That
And
makes
what's cool about
sense.
it's so interesting. And what's even more interesting is you can see Anakin come out in Luke based on his lightsaber form in Return of the Jedi. When Vader or Anakin mentions his sister, he taps into that other form that's more aggressive and starts beating on him, like,
Ah.
you know what I mean? So he kind of taps
Which makes
into
sense because that
his
was
father's,
him
yeah.
making the final choice to not be like his dad.
Yes, and then he stops
And then
and he
that in
throws
turn,
his saber down.
he decides not to be like his dad, and then his dad decides to be like him.
All right.
All
I can't. Like I said, I
right.
can't wait for Return of the Jedi. But that's cool talking about their lightsaber forms. I love seeing Yoda. I love him flipping around because
Yeah, it's
I
still
imagine him using the Force to move like that.
yeah.
Like you said.
I even as a kid, like I saw this movie. I saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters with my dad. I think I'd seen the other ones on like home video, but I didn't really remember them. But
Same.
my
I
dad
think the
brought
only
me
one I
to
saw
see
was
Revenge
3.
of the Sith for some reason, and then
Yeah.
when Yoda was fighting Palpatine, my dad was just like so amused by this like small dude, like like flipping
Yeah.
and fighting. Like it was just a thing that I always thought was really fun.
Yeah. It's fun. It is just so much fun. So essentially, that's the end of the movie, and at this point, you see the birth of the Empire. You
Yeah.
see Dooku leaving, and he takes the blueprints to Coruscant, which is he gives it to Palpatine, and you get to see. I think they play what do they play here?
The
They play a
Imperial March.
song. They play Imperial March, and you see the ships, like the destroyers, start ascending, and they're the same basically as the ones from the original trilogy. And this is the Clone War, the start of the Clone Wars, which is the beginning of the end of the Republic, and you see the birth of the Empire. A huge moment, one of the biggest, biggest things to happen in Star Wars. So that's pretty much the end of the movie, because here we're left with Anakin losing his hand. We're left with Padme and Anakin getting married, which if you notice in the DVD version, George had Padme take the hand that was robotic from Anakin when they got married to show that he is now part Vader, and she accepts that, which you'll see in episode 3. So that's pretty much in conclusion, that's it. Besides anything else we got to say. So give me top down.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to go first?
What do you think? No, you go first. You go first.
All right. So I have a thought about the Anakin and Padme wedding scene, but first I have to kind of for a long time, I think I was partially inspired by like other YouTubers that would like talk about the prequels and like negative ways. I always thought Padme and Anakin's romance was like, it didn't make sense. It was unnatural. It was, stilted, which I still kind of think that. But here's the thing I've come to realize, though. Their romance is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be bad. Like, so that one scene where Padme and Anakin are talking, like, they're just like walking somewhere and talking. And then she says, like, I might not have been the youngest queen they elected, but when they elected me, I didn't feel like I was old enough. And then Anakin being like, well, I think you did a really great job. I think the Republic really needs you. So, and then you go back to Phantom Menace. When they first meet, Anakin's like, he's like talking about how like, I don't remember. Well, whatever. Like when they have dinner at his house, he's like, I dreamed that I was a Jedi and I freed all the slaves and stuff. And like, like he had this idealistic nature about him for being so young, like he was in a position where he didn't really get to have a childhood, but still had this like childhood idealistic sense about him.
Yeah.
And Padme became a queen at a young age, so she had to grow up fast, So here's my reading of the romance, and I'll try not to drag it out too long. Padme couldn't really have a childhood either because she had to grow up fast and assume responsibilities. So, she meets Anakin, who, kind of like represents that innocence at first that she lost, that she kind of had to surrender when she took on these big responsibilities. Fast forward to Attack of the Clones, he's...
And she represents like more mature, like adult, aspect of the life.
Yeah, like he's older, and he's showing interest in her. And at first, she just flat out rebuffs him. She's like, "I don't like when you look at me like that. It makes me uncomfortable. Stop being weird." And then he's like, "Okay, I'm sorry," but he's like creepy about it.
I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna stop.
Yeah, like I feel like the reason that. Because it makes sense why he would fall in love with her, because she's Natalie Portman and hello. And mature women are, I don't want to be weird, but mature women are sexy. That's just my opinion. That's a sexy quality for a woman to have. Of course, he'd be drawn to her. But I think she fell for him because she was slowly rediscovering that innocence, that idealistic nature that she had to suppress. And, that he's learning to suppress, but hasn't been walking that path as long as her. So I think their whole romance is a passionate, idealistic, emotion-fueled suicide march.
Yeah.
Because if you notice in the wedding scene, they're standing over here and the priest is here and they're getting married, right? Where's the sun? The sun is on the right side. So the movie ends with Anakin and Padme not on the side of light. So it has this. It's not really shot like a cheerful moment either. Like it's like really gloomy, like the end of Empire. Wow. It's like poetry, so that they rhyme. I feel like it's showing you there were moments where they could have chosen not to be with each other, but they did, and that sucks. And that's supposed to make you feel tense and fear for their future because shit's gonna go down, and it does go down. So that's my
dude. That's crazy. And I think what you're so validated because of when she talked about like she's not the youngest, but she wasn't old enough. So she,
Yeah.
you're what you're saying about her and her mentality is that's correct. Wow.
Yeah.
And then obviously same with him. We get obviously more characterization for Anakin than Padme in this movie, and in the saga. But yeah, the wedding scene, that's so interesting. And she grabs, obviously the robotic hand, and they're not on the side of light. Essentially, that's.
I mean, because like when you see them looking at the twin suns, right? Suns up at this point have always been above people. In A New Hope, it like represented like this greater life that Luke wants to have but can't have, and then for Anakin in Attack of the Clones, you could see that it kind of represents like hope that's escaping him. Like it's far from him. So in both cases, they're looking at the sun in the same way. But then in this scene, I have to think it's specifically made to be that way by George, where they're over here and a sun's over here, indicating they're away from hope. Hope is over here, and they're over here. They're not in a hopeful place. This is bad. And then on the side that they're standing, like the sky looks a little like gray, like how the sky looks before like a thunderstorm or something. Like it's kind of
there's clouds,
foggy. Yeah. So I feel like that was George. Again, visual storytelling. Like I have to think that that's what he meant, and if not, it's the greatest accident of all time.
That is, it has to be, because if not, it's the greatest accident ever. That's amazing. So let's basically end it with that. I love that. I will always love this movie, and like I said, the more I watch it, the more I find out, the more I love it for different aspects, and I think it's an underrated movie in terms of Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
I think it's underappreciated, just like the Phantom Menace. I think the prequels are just I'm not gonna say underrated, but the prequels in general underappreciated because there's so much to love, and there's so much complexity and depth that you may not think the execution was there, but the concepts and the intent and the ideas were definitely there.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of that. I love this movie. So, man, we covered a lot. I think it's comprehensive enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I think
so much.
I didn't expect, because I'm still kind of learning to be more open-minded, like I said at the beginning and stuff. And so I expected to be like, I was like, I gotta rewatch Attack of the Clones. No, it's so bad, kind of. And then I was like, like as the movie kept going, I was like, am I just becoming stupider in my old age, or do I like this movie? So now, let the record show on Saturday, April 15th, 2023 at 4:28 p.m., Antonio Quinones is saying definitively, at least for now, I like Attack of the Clones. I think it is, I'd say it's a solid 7.5. I don't think it's a great movie. It's not one of my favorites, but I like it. I think it feels pretty like Star Wars. It does a lot of really cool things, has some of my favorite things in the whole saga. And I think it's a pretty good balance of the politics and the drama and all that stuff that George wanted to do that I think he kind of fell short in Phantom Menace.
And he does say that he said because he got all the exposition and a lot of the political things setting up the separatists out of the way in the first movie, this one he could focus on getting the story of the clones and all of that rolling and whatnot. So I completely agree with everything you said. Not everything, but for the most part. For the most part, underrated gem. So all right, Mr. Tony Fett, the bounty hunter we've been looking for. Thanks for coming on. It was fun. the second one down. I think this one was better than the first episode.
Yeah.
So that makes me excited for the next one because we're getting into my
as
favorite.
long as this one is, the next one's gonna be at least twice that. My God.
I'm really thinking about doing it in 2 parts, but we might just go for 5 hours. Who knows? But I don't know. So like I said, thanks for coming on. It was fun. Do you want to plug anything? We need to do this where at the end, I kind of do the promoting at the end and not the beginning. I know a lot of people do it at the beginning, but
yeah.
I want to hop right into the content and you know, be on topic quicker and just get into it and start having fun instead of just doing the boring stuff. So at the end, you know, I've been promoting the pod, but anything you want to plug, and then I'll promote some stuff.
I mean, I have a YouTube channel that I've been inconsistent because I never really tried to figure out exactly like what kind of niche I want to fill, but I think I finally figured it out. I have some videos I want to work on, but I had more videos on my channel, but then I took a lot of them down. I kind of wanted to start from scratch. So you could check out my channel. Do our names show up in the exported video?
I don't believe so. I'll put it in the description, of course.
Okay, yeah. Well, Tony Quinn, Quinn. That's not my full name. That's a approximation. That's the westernized version of my full name. If you can guess what my full name is based on that, you'll get absolutely nothing, but you'll feel smart.
You'll get some death sticks.
I don't want to sell you death stick. Yeah, so that's my channel. I'm not gonna say I'm working on anything because I don't want to announce stuff until I have stuff to announce. But
as it should be.
Yeah. Other than that, unfortunately, you could follow me on TikTok with the same username. I just post random stuff on there, but I've kind of started to pivot towards like specifically talking about like movies and games and stuff instead of just random crap. So watch me on there until it possibly gets banned forever, because
it's all they just banned it in, I think, Montana.
Really?
Yeah, but
we truly live in a society.
I'm sorry. This is how democracy ends.
With thunderous applause.
Man, Star Wars really just predicts everything, the future. So that's your plugs. I'll have everything in the description. So the Senate podcast, though, go to YouTube and Spotify. I prefer Apple Podcasts. That's what I use. But YouTube and Spotify are the largest. Apple Podcasts is up there, but Spotify and YouTube will have videos. We're on everything else. They're not as prominent, though. Usually I plug them all, but really it's just going to be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, but you can check out everything else as well. We're pretty much on everything because that's what our host does. It sends us out to all those RSS feeds. Also, Linktree in the description. Go there if you want to find anything easily. So with that, thanks for coming on. May the force be with you. I'll beat you to it. Now you got to figure out something, and then we'll end it. Throw a fast one at you.
Luminous beings, are we not this crude matter?
We'll leave it at that.